What happens if, let's say, the circle goes on for 3-4 years and some of the volunteers go on to volunteer in other areas, or they no longer want to be a CoSA volunteer? What do you think happens to the group at that time?
Replace?
Yeah, that's the point. It'll replace. So it doesn't mean the ending of a close. It doesn't mean the closure of a circle just because some of the volunteers can't do it. So just keep that in mind. I think that kind of covers all the areas of why a circle would close. Maureen would come in if she feels that the group is not, that we're not acting in the role we should be, and I know many of you have experienced that she suggests the closure of a circle. And those things are all, if you have any concerns about the functionality or just the quality of your circle, and if you're doing the right things, you know, when it says on the bottom of that maps that says, listen, you know, do we want the coordinator to visit? You know, check yes. You know, don't wait. You don't have to have a big, huge problem in your group. If there's anything that you don't know what to deal with or anything else like that, make sure to ask Maureen to come and visit. Is there anything you want to add to that, Maureen?
No, I think that covers it.
Okay, yes?
Yeah, there can be a case where a core member has his own agenda, that the reason, you know, sort of a bad reason for wanting to have a closer group, and maybe isn't committed fully to, what's supposed to happen in the group.
That's
not really
right.
taking an active part.
That's true, and you know, Maureen will come in and decide, you know, yeah, that's a very valid point. Like we had one core member that just, he didn't feel he was going to reoffend, and he wasn't concerned about it, and he just wanted like a coffee group, you know, like kind of, I want to have coffee with you guys once a week, and he asked me how I'm doing. Well, that's not the purpose. We're not being utilized to what we should be. You know, we remember again what Father Mackel outlined. It's very important. No more victims, supportive individual accountability, and we have to always remember that. And that sometimes can be a little hard. What are some of the feelings, like those of you that have, hopefully it's on my phone, no. Okay, no problem. Some of you guys have been, a lot of you have actually been involved in it. What kind of feelings do you find that you associate with when your group closed, your circle closed? What were some of the feelings you had? Can you maybe talk about that a bit? So if you want to bring up the points. Sure, that sounds good. So I can pass this around, somebody wants to talk about it. What are some of the feelings that you personally experienced or you've heard from other core members? What feelings can you have when a group closes? Yes?
We unfortunately had a CoSA member die on us.
Oh, yes.
And so it was expected that if it was because of that friendship and, you know, a disciplined friendship, it was like losing a family member. And it was tough. It was tough.
I could go on to say we did go into another circle after that. We were put in that circle because one member due to health couldn't participate and the other member had to often look after her, so they needed new members. But I found, and I'm sure I can speak for Joe too, that because of the relationship we had developed with the previous core member and then coming into a circle that it was already going. I don't think the core member, he didn't bond with us as well. But also I found that I was still back in the other circle and not even wanting to do it or knowing I was doing it and shouldn't be, I was comparing the circles. And we almost left CoSA when this core member after a year moved out of the city. And we discussed maybe we need to do something different. It's time to move to a different area of volunteering. But Morgan put us in. Yeah, they're very strong feelings.
That's understandable because it doesn't matter, it's a loss. We've all had losses, right? We've had losses with family, with friends, friendships, everything like this. So it is a form of loss and through death. So it really is, I used to work for the ambulance service and I was involved with training, and they had to deal with loss. You know, they couldn't do everything they could do to get that person well or to look after them. So you've got some real feelings you have to identify with it, and sometimes you do go through that grieving period after, and it's healthy to allow yourselves to do that. You know, it's good, and we talk about to move forward, it's good to get on another circle, but allow yourself the time to grieve a bit too, and to get emotionally healthy, because there's so many feelings that come through, but it's all different forms of loss. I used to be an emergency and ICU nurse, and we used to lose people all the time. It didn't matter what the resources you had, it didn't matter how much you tried or how much you wanted, you lost people, you know? And that's, again, where it comes through us. We're trying our best. We're all involved in here because we are of a caring nature and we want to help. That's why we're here. So with that comes that baggage at times that makes us very vulnerable, and it hurts, and that's what we have to recognize, and we've got to probably learn to compartmentalize. Anyways, it's not a language program, it's not an English class, so don't worry about it, but we have to kind of learn how to do that and put our CoSA groups in their little boxes in our lives. And that comes again to relationships and friendships, and there's different categories, and we have to recognize that. In just a moment here.
I won't need the mic. There's a sadness. I don't know how many people have these experiences, but if you've ever been involved with AA or NA, it's the same kind of sadness, or you've had an alcoholic or drug addict in your family that's been doing well, and you reach that point, you realize they're going to go back out on the pipe, on the hill. They're going to go back to the bar. And there's nothing you can do once their mind is made up. There's nothing you can do about it. It's a sadness of the opportunities that are not going to happen, and the loss of being able to influence to their good in their lives anymore, because when they go there, you can't go there with them.
That's a valid point, and what happens is that you just, you lost the opportunity to help this person, and you think, oh, there could have been so much more. That's very important, and the other thing to consider, just a quick thing about the loss, and we're still talking about that, is there's a loss of the friendship with your other group members, right? Your volunteers. You develop a relationship with the other volunteers, and you think, oh my gosh, I'm not going to be seeing them every week anymore, you know?
Wait till the annual.
That's right. You got to wait for the CoSA banquet, and then for training like this advance, it's where we get a chance to see each other. Yes, just a moment.
Also sense of self-doubt or inadequacy, and the feelings of helplessness, like, because you were never in control, but then you were feeling like you were hit, and then all of a sudden, especially if it's sudden, it's hard.
It's that whole thing of, if I had done this, if I had done that, if I had done that differently, you know, we can almost say, oh my gosh, what, you know, if only if I'd known that, if only I could have done that, and you know, so you feel that whole sense of doubt. You know, was I the best CoSA volunteer I could be? You know, would they have done better with another circle? You know, so really, it doesn't, it brings up, it surfaces so much, you know, so much surfaces to the top when something like that happens, because you've got to deal with this, you know, you've been wanting to help them and you can't, and you see this, so there's lots of other things. What other kind of feeling, just one, Peter?
Yeah. Yeah, we had one circle that came to a very sudden end, like we went off, downtown to meetings we were expecting to have, and the board member was not there, and then it turned out like he'd be offended, and he was back, and then we've never, that was a few years ago, and like I was talking to Roger earlier on, and like we never knew like what happened to him, you know, like have you heard of it or anything, and there's that unfinished feeling,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, just
no closure.
like I wonder where he is, because we're not, and even if we knew where he was, we were not allowed really basically to have any more communication with him.
Yeah, that suddenness, it's like you come, all of a sudden you get a phone call from Maureen and says, so-and-so breached, you know, or he's back, or he's, and you're going like, oh my gosh, you know, like it's just that surprise, that element of not knowing, and what did I miss? Is there something, you know, that maybe we didn't talk about in the meetings that would have helped him from doing this? Maureen, have you got anything to add?
Yeah, just to go back, if I could, just about at the very start when a circle closes, because I don't think we touched on one, and several of you here were involved in it. When it closed, and the reason for closing it was blaming one of the volunteers, and that was huge. So he'd been manipulating, as we talked about this morning. But rather than being honest, I think in manipulating, this is my sense of what happened, is he was going off his federal order onto provincial, where he thought there wouldn't be the same kind of reporting. So his reason to get out of the circle, or to leave the circle, was to blame one of the volunteers for having challenged him in a, I don't know if Mike could say anything about that, but that to me is the worst kind of closure. They didn't decide, hey, I don't need the circle. I'm blaming someone for leaving it. Maybe Mike can say it.
Just one, Mike?
Yeah, I think that experience was that, looking back, it's always hindsight, 20/20 hindsight. And I think the outcome of that was an inability for this guy to face up to, you know, his dilemma. And I think definitely when he switched from federal to provincial, there appears to be fewer restrictions or fewer accountabilities at the provincial level than there are at the federal level. And I think he, in hindsight, he really used CoSA to try and gain some credibility at the federal level to lessen federal side putting more restrictions on it. And I think he was very manipulative that way. But you know, it only comes back in hindsight, and you know, it is what it is.
What other feelings do you think you can associate with the closing of a circle? Have you ever felt relief? You know, because it's been such a hard circle, you know, like, and you go like, oh my gosh, I'm thinking, oh no, it's Wednesday and I gotta go to another one, and you know, it's sometimes that, or hey, I've got free time finally too. I have an extra couple of hours a week now, you know. Until, yeah, that's right, then she's gonna rebook you, but there's no doubt. But you know, that's sometimes, if it's been a really difficult circle, or there's been no attachment, you know, that's the thing. Sometimes if there's no attachment, or there's not that mutual trust and that honesty, that, you know, you, like I was saying earlier, you can really tell when you've made it with your circle, when you got that trust with each other. You know you're going to get the truth out of him, and you know you're going to tell him the truth and stuff, and you know when that trust happens. So that's good. So that's really, yes.
What I was going to say, disappointment.
Yes.
A feeling of disappointment, because one of our circles, and like I know, he says, oh, you guys didn't help me very much anyway.
That's lovely.
Yeah, that's that whole sense, you know, the sense of disappointment, frustration too, you know, like if he had only tried harder, you know, if only he was motivated, you know. So we have all of those feelings, both on his part and our part. So we've got to deal with all of those. Any other feelings that you think? What
I'd
about?
just like to speak to the relief.
Okay.
Not just the relief that a difficult situation was going down, but I remember one person, I was quite relieved that they breached, because we knew he was going to reoffend.
Oh.
And he was a violent offender. And we were just glad, total surprise. Like you said, you show up and they're not there. And we get the phone call. Is anybody at the meetings? Because it's not there. But yeah, sometimes there's a relief because the system has caught him before he's done something worse. But, and that's a different kind of relief than the relief that, oh, I don't have to face him anymore. It's a relief that, oh,
He's off the streets.
he's off the streets. And I'm sorry to say, some of the people manage to get in front of us who are like that. They're great manipulators, perhaps. Maybe once in a while, kind of.
Yeah. But remembering that they're not called high-risk sex offenders for nothing, and that's what we tend to forget. They're very dysfunctional, most of these men, and I should say men, because we've had a few women, but they really are. So I think you have to tie that in with the group too, remembering always, no matter how good the relationship is, if you go back and look at their file, which we forget, these guys have many issues. So the fact that they're so successful is really attributable to what you're doing.
And it's like, you can also have feelings of, failure. It's like, I failed this group, I failed the guy, and you gotta remember, always stay focused that, it's his decision whether he wants to fit back into it, whether he's wanting to conform to his restrictions, if he wants to participate actively in the circle. It's ultimately his decision, not our decision. So those feelings of guilt and failure, maybe I didn't attend enough meetings, or I was away on holidays, or this, you've got to remember that it's ultimately his decision and his efforts are going to make it.
It's kind of like the exercise cycle complaining when a core member gets fat for not using us as an exercise cycle. We're just a tool there, ultimately. And they work with us and we help them, or they don't, but that's not on us. It's on them.
Absolutely.
They don't have to come to see us.
No. They agree to it, the covenant, again, getting back to the covenant, looking at this is what we've agreed to, this is what we're going to do. Any other feelings you can think are associated with the closing of a circle?
A little bit of anger too.
Anger, absolutely. What kind of things could you be telling yourself about anger? What do you think?
I was going to say, he uses us. Sometimes you feel angry, like he used us. He wasn't serious about this. And we did all this.
And you got caught.
Yeah.
I was manipulated, I was used in this way, why doesn't he know any better? Like, he's done this 6 times before. Why isn't it this time? Why is he not, he knows what's going to happen, So those are some of the feelings that you can have.
I think we could have been helping somebody who would have benefited from it.
Yeah, just a waste of our time. It's been a waste of our time. We could be in another circle where somebody really wants our help and our efforts, right?
And I'm just thinking, because I'm thinking of a couple of the volunteers over there whose circle is sort of in limbo and have been for a while. A fabulous circle, fabulous volunteers, but he's suffering extreme mental health issues right now. He may or may not come back. There's people working with him, outreach workers and what have you, who say that he's starting to come around. He was almost OCD'd about cleanliness, and now he can't even get in his place for tripping over things. He's really in a bad way, so we don't close it, but we're probably going to have to. But there's going to be no closure there. Went from a great Christmas celebration, right, and then that's it. He's mentally ill, and whether or not he comes back. So that leaves you kind of with a big question mark. So I think that's a really tough one. A death is very sad. We've had 4 core members who have died over the last few years, but that's sort of understandable. That's sort of a natural thing, right? We do expect that all of us are going to die someday, but when it's mental health and those others, I think. So I was just thinking of you people, how tough it is for you over there. Don't worry.
Any other comment? Yes? Or just Mike? Just a minute.
I think it's really important. All of us have empathy, all of us have compassion, and all of these emotions and feelings are obviously legitimate. But it's important to put perspective on what we're doing, because put yourself in the person's shoes. Just imagine what they've gone through in terms of their upbringing. That environment certainly has led to what they've done and the consequences for that. So that's a huge mountain to overcome, and it's not always possible to overcome it. And it's important to remind ourselves of that so that we don't kind of beat ourselves up thinking, well, it was our fault or anything. Because some of these situations they're really, really sad and really, almost insurmountable. And that's the perspective they bring to it. So it's important that we don't kind of beat ourselves up too much on it.
I like to remember something that Maureen has told us too, that we're not professionals, we're volunteers. We have a certain amount of accountability, but we can't have too high expectations of ourselves and what we can accomplish.
That's a valid point with it, and that's the thing is every time we have continuing education, advanced training, we do programming, it's always about the CM. This topic is also about you guys. This is the health and the welfare of the volunteers. That's why Maureen wanted this brought up in it, because the closing of a circle, it has got a big impact on all the volunteers. So that's something to always remember. You've got to look after yourselves, and you've got to put it all back into perspective as to what can be done. Okay? So, yes.
I just remember too when I'm in the prisons now, and I'm in, to interview guys and for other things, and it always blows me away because almost every time I'm in, I see somebody I knew who's back in, who was outside and they're back in. And when they see me, they kind of hang their head a little bit, right? But I make a point of saying, hello, how are you? And what I almost always hear is, I know it didn't go well. I know I didn't do well. But you know what? Next time, Maureen, I'm going to make it. Those were the greatest people, those volunteers. So they might be back and they might feel kind of some shame or, disappointment. But when they come back, and we've got quite a few who've come back, and that's when they're really ready often, especially if they're younger, when they come back 5, 6 years later. So it's really moving to me to hear what I thought didn't go well and say, oh, that was the greatest thing, those volunteers. I just love them. I hear that word love, often.
Good, yes.
I just feel compelled to make a little statement here that being as we all have the religious background here, it's not something we actually push into the CoSA circle necessarily, but for each of us when we're involved in this, we have to realize that it's the grace of God reacting to whatever we're doing, that we're like a catalyst to make that happen. So in the end, this is whatever is in God's plan that we're trying to work with here. We can't get so personally heavily invested that we lose sight of that, because that has to be our main focus about this. So we carry it into our prayer life and we use it to know that God, you're the one in charge here. You're the one that has to make the change. We're just catalysts at best.
That's a good point. That's a very good point. Good. Any other feelings that anybody's experienced or can imagine? No? Okay, then, once the circle is closed, we get a phone call from Maureen, and Maureen says to us, okay, let's get together for a debriefing. What's the value of a debriefing? All of you again, because I don't need to say this stuff because you've all experienced it. What's good about a debriefing? What does it do for the volunteers?
Helps us clear any sense of guilt. The shoulda, coulda, wouldas. What we should have done, could have done, would have done. Because if we have missed something, it's an opportunity for us to learn. And if we haven't missed something, we're just feeling guilty naturally. Maureen's really good at letting us off the hook. She usually knows when we screwed up, and she usually knows when we hadn't, and it really wasn't our fault. We just be a little too caring, a little too guilty.
And sometimes Maureen can come and she gets to find out more details about the core member. So we get to find out a little bit about what we didn't know initially. So she says, well, this is what's happened. He did this or he did that, and then we get a bit more insight into why this happened and going on. Why else is a debriefing session good?
To get official closure, or?
That's right, yeah. And to acknowledge your feelings. The volunteer that works along with you might have the same kind of feelings too. You're not alone in the way you feel, And it gets a chance to, you know how it is, how good it is to verbalize and to talk about you. That's why we're doing these kind of sessions here, so that you get a chance to acknowledge your feelings and to discuss them and recognize you're not all by yourself. We're all together with all of this. Yes, ma'am.
Also to say goodbye to each other, right? Because you won't see each other until Support and Development Day.
or the CoSA banquet or whatever. And usually we try to place you with different volunteers on the next circle if possible, so that, and there's good reasons for that, you don't want the same volunteers with a new core member, then he's the new one on the circle and everybody knows everybody else. So with the exception of married couples, we try to separate the volunteers. So it's your chance of saying goodbye, I've really enjoyed it, and you know, if you want to keep up with the volunteer, then you can discuss it. But that's important to acknowledge that loss too of the relationship with the people you've been working with and move to a new group of volunteers.
One other point that comes out often, I think, that with the debriefing session, it makes us remember or realize just how successful we were. And you know, how we define success is different. I mean, maybe 3 months not offending is great, you know. Maybe what he's only capable of. You know, he may not be capable at this time. Maybe next time he comes out, but right now he's not ready for it. So it helps us define what success is. I mean, were there no more victims? Isn't that success right there? There's been no more victims. So we have to kind of to redefine, reassess what success is, instead of saying we failed, you know, there's no longer a circle, No, actually we did pretty darn good. We did the best we could. You know, he needs a bit more time. He hasn't quite learned it yet. You know, so you get a chance to redefine what success is for your circle. Yes.
I think we can borrow from AA on that one. At the end of the meeting, that was the week they did it. So, and it's like 1 day at a time for them. So we should embrace and enjoy it. We were part of that 24.
Any other comments? Yes.
I mean, I've never gone through a closure of a circle, but I would assume it would be a time where we had a debrief, of course, but it's also another part of our training to get ready for another. So there's not learn things that will be beneficial.
It's a great learning experience. It really is. It tells us, you know, what's been good, what hasn't been as good, or whatever else, and it chalks it up and gets you ready for another circle, basically. And it allows you an opportunity to recommit to CoSA. And that's an ongoing thing. You know, it's like, okay, well, I signed a form that said I'll be involved for a year, you know, but if you got a real commitment there and you're going to stick with it, and you know, and you have to realize the value that you have been to these gentlemen when you've been out. So that's basically what it is. The best thing to kind of, what do you do after all this then? You know, what happens after this? What do you think is a good thing to do after a circle's closed?
Jump back into another one.
Right. Yeah, he was planted, by the way, that's right. No.
Well, I was thinking of that because several closures, people had been putting off leaving their volunteer job. So when it ended, they went on to something else in their lives. I know you only ask a year's commitment, but
It's changed to 5.
my commitment,
In writing, that's my legal guideline.
my commitment is like in Matthew's quote about did the lease for that. My commitment is until I'm not needed.
Good, good. That's a good point to put. That's it. Just like in closing, basically talking about the circles is that as difficult as it is, we need to remember that the termination of a circle, regardless of the reasons for it, is the core member's choice. It's always the core member's choice. He chose not to follow, not to be cooperative, or he breached, or whatever the case. It is a choice that he makes, and he's may not be able at that time to meet those commitments. He isn't, engaged enough into the process yet. He still needs a little bit more time. We can do everything right, but the final decision, the final choice of success or failure is up to the CM. And we've always got to remember that, because we do the best we can. And you guys sitting here today, just saying, you may have been with CoSA for 7-8 years, and you're here because you think there's an opportunity to know more or how to do a better job. And I commend all of you for being here today. And thank you very much. And if there's any questions, I'll give the handout right now, but if there's any other questions relating to the closing of the circle?
Yeah, have we ever closed the circle? I don't know, because we finished. I mean, the person now has all the tools, they don't need us, the risk factors are complete, and just sort of a mutual agreement, we don't need to do this anymore. In other words, the success story.
I would say we've had what we call little graduations. And I would say over the years that maybe we've had, I'm going to estimate 15, and probably half of those, maybe I better say 16, 8, we felt were ready to go on their own too. The other 8, we didn't feel that they were ready, but we acknowledge it, they think they are. What good is it going to do not? So we have a little celebration and say, but should you run into any problems, feel free to call us again and look at it. But definitely we have what we call graduations. And those are happy times, right? Those are good times.
And like Father Mackel mentioned before, and Marie has, is that, if you've got a circle and it isn't taking the same form as it used to, there's no reason why not. If you feel that you still want to, and the CN still wants that contact, you just redefine it again. Like it says, like meetings once a month, so that you can't, because you think, I know he's trying hard, I just don't feel that he can, he still needs that pat on the back once in a while and stuff. So it can be restructured and still stay within the CoSA guidelines. And that's being looked at and accommodated. So we have to remember, we should make sure to do that. Is that good? Any other comments? Again, thank you very much. And